So, Hare Krishna to everyone. Welcome to our third session on the topic of GITA NAGARI essay. And we will immediately get into our topic this evening, which is dealing with both Srila Prabhupada actually and Gandhi. I'll bring up in a few minutes the contents after sharing or saying a few prayers of invocation, and then we'll share our screen here. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmiritam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapanantikam Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvisheshanyavadi Paschatade Satarini Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Sri Prabhupada ki Jai. So I will immediately share my screen. Whether we were able to find out, I'm asking, I guess, our co-host here, Narendra Rishi, whether we can project the PowerPoint and I can still be on the screen or not.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, that would not be possible because you are streaming, and if I put you in spotlight, your screen share only will come to picture. So it is the same, not two separate things.
Okay, it is one or the other.
Yeah.
So we should write a letter to the Zoom organization to try and work that out. Anyways, okay, that's fine. So I'll just share the screen. Let's see here. Yeah. So module number 3. Here we go. Yes. Srila Prabhupada and M.K. Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, known as Mahatma Gandhi for most people in India. As I mentioned, just to keep us focused, I should explain here how, this whole presentation on GITA NAGARI, after we have gone through the 4 movements, which was presented yesterday, we are naturally focusing on the 4th movement. And not that we want to neglect the first 3, but the whole idea of GITA NAGARI is, in our present context, is to highlight the kind of hidden or concealed 4th movement that Prabhupada spoke about. But this evening, I thought I would, as part of the presentation, highlight some very important quotations given by by both our founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada, as well as by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And that'll be shown actually in the content that I'm just bringing up now. Yes, the recurring theme of Vedic culture being agrarian in nature. So this is the 6 items we'll be looking at, actually probably quite a bit of material. Number 1, we mentioned about 2 swadharmas. I'll just bring it up on the screen so that it's as clear as possible to everyone. Very, very important to actually have a clear, and I would say a very deep understanding of what that means. Secondly, Vaishnavas and Varnashrama, because as we know, some of our devotees, probably a good number, have various questions or doubts regarding the relation between Vaishnavas and Varnashrama. Number 3, we will look at what I refer as 3 gifts of nature, very closely, directly, intimately connected with the subject matter as well. And then very briefly, summarizing about Srila Prabhupada in contrast with Gandhiji. And the last portion will be focused on village organization, because to a large extent, as we will demonstrate in our presentation, Srila Prabhupada often quoted or often referred to Gandhiji and actually praised him for having a good understanding of village organization, the need for maintaining this particular aspect or dimension in not only in India, but around the world, but especially, of course, in India. So let's begin with 2 swadharmas. I'm just bringing up here direct quotations from Srila Prabhupada. There are 2 levels of dharma. One that I refer to as the material norm, which is actually Varnashrama dharma. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada explains, on the bodily plane, swadharma is called Varnashrama dharma, or man's stepping stone for spiritual understanding. Human civilization begins from the stage of Varnashrama dharma. And there are many similar quotes, actually, but this is one is quite clear and direct. Secondly, spiritual, what is the spiritual norm? Or we could call it spiritual swadharma. There is material swadharma, Varnashrama dharma, and there is spiritual swadharma, Bhagavad dharma. So, real swadharma is spiritual swadharma. And what is the occupation of that swadharma? Jiver Swarup Hoy Krishna Nityadas. That is spiritual swadharma from Bhagavad Gita lecture chapter 2, actually the same reference. So I request the devotees actually to keep this in mind in our discussions, understanding, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that our focus, the main thrust of this whole presentation, these 10 modules, is largely focused on the material norm and how it is meant to be harmonized and balanced with the spiritual dimension of life. Simple example is we have this body. We know it's a material body. And we know that within the body, we are the spiritual self or the soul. So we cannot neglect the soul, and we also cannot neglect also, although in the Vedic cultures we know, we are encouraged to minimize, naturally, the needs or the necessities of the body. So what are the activities within the context of Varnashrama dharma? Well, it is in terms of serving within the 4 varnas, social divisions, and the 4 ashramas. The ideal lifestyle, we mentioned, and we'll be stressing that continuously, is agrarian in nature, close to cows, land, and the cultivation of knowledge. And education is either formal in the context of Gurukula. We'll have a special presentation on the topic of education in itself because it's quite important, very involved as well. So Gurukul for the minority or the smaller percentage of boys, and then non-formal education, which is meant to be in the context of Vedic culture, centered on cow protection, agriculture, small-scale industries, etc. Yes. And Bhagavat Dharma, the complete science of bhakti, bhakti yoga, through the 9 processes of devotional service, beginning with Sravanam, Kirtanam, etc. Reviving, our main goal is to revive our original relationship with Lord Krishna in any of the 5 rasas, from Santa Rasa to Madhurya Rasa. So before going to this section, I'll just leave it up here. What I'd like to possibly emphasize or underline or point out, keeping in mind the 4 movements that Srila Prabhupada is describing and referring to both in the letter of 1949 as well as GITA NAGARI, we should be easily able to understand how our society and our devotees in general have mainly and primarily focused on the first 3 of the 4 movements, which are very intimately, directly connected with our temples. In other words, the Krishna consciousness movement has mainly focused on establishing temples, preaching from our temples, bringing people to our temples, and mostly, of course, that has taken place in the cities. We are much, much less known for doing agriculture. Some people, of course, know a little bit about it, but on the whole, we are more known for our number of temples, for the books that we distribute, for Harinam, Sankirtan, especially in the early days. So all of these were centered actually on the first 3. So that is why there is a need. There's a very urgent need, I would say, to highlight and understand the 4th movement and how we, as a society, as an international society, we need to really come to grips with this. And so this section number 2 here of our content, Varnashrama and Vaishnavas, should help us to understand from the different quotations of these great acharyas, what is the relationship between Varnashrama and Vaishnavas. So the first one, from the Sajjana Toshani by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, those who have sufficiently studied sociology certainly conclude that the system of Varnashrama is the topmost social system, number 1. Secondly, if one is situated in the principle of Varnashrama, then his nature cannot be lost. Rather, one can receive huge opportunity and advantage to cultivate Krishna consciousness. And the 3rd statement, which is very important, Varnashrama Dharma is the society of the Vaishnavas in their conditional stage. This was brought up yesterday, I believe, by one devotee who was making the same observation, actually, I believe Maharaj was actually making this point, possibly a few devotees as well, that because we're not pure devotees, therefore, other quotes are there by our acharyas, as long as we have even a tinge of connection with the modes of material nature, we should work within the system of Varna and Asrama. A few more quotes. This is from the Sri Bhaktya Loka, again of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But a devotee who desires to properly pass his life still accepts his duties according to Varnasrama, as those duties are favorable to devotional service and counted as part of devotional service. All these activities are no longer called karma. So this is a very important statement, that when we properly perform these activities for the samsiddhi haritoshanam, for the pleasure of Krishna, of Hari, then those so-called material activities within the so-called material system of Varna, because it's connected with Krishna, and depending on our level of consciousness, those activities and the whole Daiva Varnashrama therefore becomes spiritualized, and it is no longer material activity, and there's no longer any karma involved. Another quote from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur from the Sri Chaitanya Shikshamrita. With the assistance of Varnashrama Dharma, a person should cultivate bhakti. It is also necessary to follow the rules of Varnashrama in the cultivation of bhakti. So all of these quotations are very important to help us understand more clearly. Though all humans have a right to practice bhakti, those who follow the regulations of Varnashrama have a much easier time. Very powerful statements, naturally, by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And again, from the Hari Nama Chintamani, the question may arise why one should follow the Varnashrama system at all. The answer is that everyone who has taken a human birth must follow this system. By this scientific arrangement of society, the general masses of people can attain to their full capacity according to their individual nature and gradually attain devotion to Krishna. Those outside the Varnashrama system should be made to give up all bad habits and begin practicing as Shudras. This must be the path for civilized society to carry on life. And the last one, I believe here, during his stay in the material body, in the material world, the soul should follow the Varnashrama institution. That institution is the eternal religion, Sanatan Dharma. Very interesting how Prabhupada in many places also equates Varnashrama Dharma to Sanatan Dharma, because it is the eternal activity for those conditioned souls in the material world. It's not meant to remain our eternal activity as conditioned soul, but for those who are conditioned, that is the prescribed activity. The Varnas were established by great sages in the Holy Land of India. If they are present in other countries, they are not in their original pure form, although in some form they are widespread at the present time. Without first accepting the divisions of the Varnas, divisions that correspond to the different natures of different human beings, one cannot attain perfection. Gradually, becoming fortunate, the outcast, Antyaja, and persons of mixed birth, Varna Sankara, may become sinless, act purely, and enter Lord Krishna's family. These rules are eternal. Some other quotations will be coming up by Srila Prabhupada a little bit later on here. This third aspect deals with the three gifts of nature. I was not aware of this actually up until just a few years ago when I was undertaking my doctoral research in sociology. And Krishna somehow directed me to this very important statement by grandfather Bhishmadev in the Mahabharata. We'll be giving the reference here. When grandfather Bhishmadev, as we know, was lying on his bed of arrows, it was Krishna's arrangement that he instructed all of the Pandavas, especially Yudhishthira Maharaj, who had become very morose after feeling responsible for the death of so many people. So this is the statement here. This is the beginning. There are three gifts that go by the same name and that are productive of equal merits. Indeed, these three gifts confer the fruition of every wish. The three objects whose gifts are of such a character are kind, cow, number one, two, earth, and three, knowledge. That person who tells his disciple words of righteous import drawn from the Veda acquires merit equal to that which is won by making gifts of earth and kind. Kind is the old name actually for cow. And he goes on to explain, Bhishmadev, grandfather Bhishmadev, similarly are kind praised as objects of gifts. There is no object of gift higher than they. Kind are supposed to confer merit immediately. They are also, O Yudhisthira, such that a gift of them cannot but lead to great merit. Kind are the mothers of all creatures. They bestow every kind of happiness. So this is from the Mahabharata, Anushasana Parva, chapter 69, called Dana Dharma Parva. I humbly request devotees to actually, I'll say a few more things about this in the next slides, but this is extremely important. Not only is it important, but it is absolutely essential within the Vedic culture. So the three gifts of nature refer, as we have just seen, actually to three mothers. The first mother, often referred to as Mother Surabhi, the original cow in the spiritual world, from whom all the other cows actually come. Mother Surabhi, then Mother Bhumi, or Mother Nature, means the earth. And the third mother, Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, knowledge. There's a prayer, one shloka, which I've been trying to find for quite some time, whereby Mother Saraswati is instructing one Brahmana that you kindly don't give me to anybody and everybody. In Vedic culture, knowledge is not meant to be given to anyone and everyone. Knowledge is meant to be given to those who deserve to receive the knowledge, those who are qualified. That's a whole subject that we will be covering again when we have our presentation on Vedic education. So in other words, knowledge is not, as seen in modern day society, a right. You know, we have this propaganda that everyone has a right to education. Actually, this is a false propaganda. but it needs to be understood in its proper context. Knowledge is not an individual's right. Knowledge actually is a privilege. One needs to be privileged, just like to live in a Hare Krishna temple, it's not everybody's right. One has to qualify to live in the temple. One has to follow the 4 basic rules and regulations, isn't it? So in a similar way, in the Vedic culture, and that's why modern education is so far removed from what Vedic culture is teaching us, is very much misleading in so many ways. So these 3 mothers, now I want to continue here actually in the next slide. I thought I would bring this in because it's like very contemporary. We know that a few days ago, on April the 22nd, it was Earth Day. I only came to know maybe a couple of days before that. And we have a ministry, global ministry for cow protection and agriculture. Kalakanta Prabhu is the minister. And he put on a very nice presentation. I only watched a little bit of it. The first speaker, he had different speakers, was His Holiness Krishna Kshetra Maharaj. And he brought out, for those who have not heard it yet, the harsh reality of unprotected cows in our modern day 21st century, by explaining, because he did some research, he wrote a book on it as well, how every year 300 million cows are slaughtered. And then he broke it down, which means approximately 800,000, that's 8 lakhs cows every day. 34,000 cows are being slaughtered every hour, 567 every minute, and it comes to approximately 9 to 10 every second. So Prabhupada had the following things to say about this. Therefore, the world is suffering so much sinful activities, and the greatest sinful activity is cow slaughter, and they are committing. They do not know what will be the result. Spoken in Mayapur, 1977. Just a few quotes like this. The killing of cows. This is from the Light of the Bhagavat, written before Srila Prabhupada went to the Western world. The killing of cows by human society is one of the grossest suicidal policies. And those who are anxious to cultivate the human spirit must turn their attention first toward the question of cow protection. Another quote from Srila Prabhupada: there should be a thorough overhauling of the social system, and society should revert to the Vedic principles, that is, the 4 Varnas and the 4 Ashramas. And the last quote, I believe, this Krishna consciousness movement is for the protection of Brahminical culture and cows. Then automatically the peace of the world will come. If these 2 things are done, protecting Brahmanas and cows, yes, if these 2 things are done. This is Vedic literature. They pick up the essence of the things, and all other things follow. So I'm mentioning all of this because when we will, now we're going to go to briefly an overview. It's very difficult to have a short overview of our founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada, but I'm just highlighting a few things that we will immediately be able to see some contrast and some parallel with Gandhi. And actually our 4th module, which is tomorrow, we'll be dealing again with Gandhi in the context of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And this has to do with an ongoing, we could say, clash of ideology that we as devotees, that we as a society an international society need to be aware of where it began historically and how it is being carried on even today in the world. So I'm coming to this, yes, Srila Prabhupada, well, this is information that is probably not complete, but I'm just highlighting a few points here. Devotees, of course, are all familiar with these points, but Srila Prabhupada, we know something very significant. He explained, similar to my Guru Maharaj, I had the great fortune to be born in a Vaishnava family. Prabhupada also, naturally, after meeting Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in 1922, took initiation some few years later. And immediately, although he was a follower of Gandhi, part of Gandhi's movement for a number of years, he, upon meeting his Guru Maharaj, could understand that the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the real mission in life, beyond any other mission, including the mission of liberating India from the British at the time. And way back in 1944, at the age of 48, he began his Back to Godhead magazine. And then not only he took initiation from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he also took sannyas later on in 1959 at the age of 63. And then understanding the need, the importance of bringing this culture, Vedic culture, to the rest of the world. As we all know, he embarked on this great mission in 1965, and the rest is history, as we all know. Now, if we look at M.K. Gandhi or Gandhiji, he was a little older than Srila Prabhupada. He went to England. His education was actually Western education in England, in London, at the law college called Inner Temple. Joined a vegetarian society where different ideas about simple life and moral values and the initial idea of nonviolence were very much connected with the people who were part of this society. I remember many years ago, before I joined as a devotee, I had joined the Ottawa Vegetarian Society, actually. And I remember some reporters had come to interview members, and in real typical Canadian uncultured manner, they said after interviewing that, okay, thank you very much for giving us a chance to interview all of you, and now we're going to go out to the restaurant and have our regular meal of whatever. Yeah. Anyways, Gandhiji was very much involved, as we know, in political matters. But as we will see in a few minutes, a very interesting presentation that I want to share with all of you of Prabhupada speaking to one of his disciples who actually shared this. It's recorded and I put it in writing. It's coming up in a few seconds, whereby in that particular conversation, that means after going to the West, Srila Prabhupada, on many occasions, as we know, referred to Gandhi and appreciated his intention, his plan to actually try and keep India within the Vedic framework, as opposed to opting for industrialization, which is what actually happened. And in the latter part of his life, he actually kind of stepped back from politics, and from 1934 went to this Sevagram village, where he concentrated on practicing himself this spinning and handloom weaving, etc., like that. So, I mean, this is extremely brief, of course, and there's so many more things that could be said naturally for both Srila Prabhupada and Gandhiji, but I think in the next slides here, this is a rendering from memory from a devotee who is now known as Bhagavat Swami, His Holiness Bhagavat Swami. He's Prabhupada disciple. I remember in the early days when His Holiness Gaur Govinda Maharaj was actually sent by Srila Prabhupada to open a center in Bhubaneswar. He was already a little bit elderly, Gaur Govinda Maharaj, and he had requested at least one or two assistants, and this devotee, Bhagavat Das, at the time, an American disciple of Srila Prabhupada, had been chosen to be his assistant. So he spent a number of years with him, and he heard many different nice instructions. And then later on, he, I believe just a few years ago, this was recorded in some conversation or maybe some class that he was giving. So I think it's very important to hear what is being mentioned here, and I will just read it. You can all follow. I was sitting with Srila Prabhupada on the top of the roof above his apartment in Bombay. It was in the evening, and we sat there, I think up until, anyways, we were alone, just he and I. I don't remember whether it was an hour or 2 hours, but it appeared timeless. And we had been on that roof up until 10 or 11 o'clock alone. So just him and Prabhupada, very rare to get such kind of close, intimate association with Srila Prabhupada. We were just talking, and he was telling me about Indian history, about Gandhi. And he said that Gandhi had the proper plan for revitalizing India. He started to explain. He said Gandhi never wanted big cities. He never wanted factories to open up. He never liked that. He said that Gandhi was concerned that people had the basic necessities of life in the villages, that his plan was to first arrange for everyone to have food, clothing, education, good water supply, religious training, and some occupation or craft, making cloth or jewelry, something of that nature. He said that these were the basic principles that Gandhi lived by. He felt that if in every village the basic needs of the people were met through the simple self-sufficient principles, that then later on, if they wanted to develop some factories here and there, then that could be done. He said that Sardar Patel and Nehru, they betrayed him. That was his opinion, Prabhupada's opinion. That was his vision of it. They saw that India's future, Nehru and Sardar Patel, was through factories. They would bring in all the factories and things of that nature, create jobs for everyone. He said, now look at what has happened. All these young men have left their landed properties. They are not growing food anymore. They have come to the cities. They're living in shanty towns. They're living in squalor, dirty condition, working in the factory for only a few rupees, not making enough money even for a living. He said they have spoiled everything. Then he started to lament. He was lamenting that India has become spoiled because of all of this Western civilization. Gandhi wanted simple life, that is the real way, self-sufficient life. Chitranjan Das, he also wants, and then he became, I never seen him like this. I love Gandhi. I love Chitranjan Das. They wanted to save India. But it was all spoiled by these politicians. Then the next morning, this is Bhagavad Das just speaking like this, verbatim. We were on the morning walk. We were walking down on the beach, that's in Bombay, close to Juhu. And I was on one side of Srila Prabhupada. And usually when some people would come to enter into the march, so to speak, down the beach, Prabhupada turned to them in respect and bowed like that. Srila Prabhupada was always a gentleman, a perfect gentleman. And so when we walked, we seemed to be walking an extraordinarily long distance. He never usually walked this far down the beach. At a certain point, I saw him finally going like this, means gesturing, gesture of respect. I was on his side and he had turned this way and went like this. So I turned to look to see who was coming, and there was nobody. But in the distance, there was the statue of Gandhi with his stick standing there. Prabhupada had walked this entire distance to get down there to offer some respect to the statue of Gandhi. Everyone was looking to see what he was doing. Nobody else had been with me the night before, so it dawned on me why he had done what he did. Yes. So this is quite telling and very much in line with other statements that Prabhupada, on different occasions, mostly in the company of other devotees, would make regarding village organization. Actually, I wanted to share, I have a few of those quotes, but there are quite a few of them, and possibly at some later stage. Here are a few of them actually from a lecture at GITA NAGARI. So we're in the last section of our presentation here, actually, which has to do with village organization. So Prabhupada mentioned, live village life, simple life, and be satisfied with the bare necessities. There's no need of luxury, and save time and chant Hare Krishna. This is the ideal life. So I'm very pleased that you are doing that, and do it more nicely so that others may be attracted. This town life, industrial life, factory life is asuric life. It is killing human ambition. It is killing civilization. And this is what Gandhi had to say regarding agrarian versus urban. There are two schools of thought current in the world. One wants to divide the world into cities and the other into villages. The village civilization and the city civilization are totally different things. One depends on machinery and industrialization, and the other on handicrafts. Yes. So I will exit my screen. Yes. And just make a few comments here before we open up for some discussion. I feel it's very important that we understand as devotees. I mean, it was completely clear in Srila Prabhupada's mind that modern day civilization, which was more and more becoming urbanized, isn't it, was totally against what Vedic culture is actually advocating. And Prabhupada was aware of when this trend actually began. And it began with the Industrial Revolution. It began also, we were mentioning, I believe, in the first or second module, with the French Revolution as well, where religion and monarchy was rejected. And through industrialization, the whole world became more and more materialistic, as it is now, and more atheistic as well. So Srila Prabhupada was aware of the need for us as a movement, as a society, to actually not only theoretically understand this, if we actually properly understand the whole philosophy behind this, then to that extent, we will actually put it into practice by reestablishing, by reviving this Vedic culture, which is village, primarily village culture, cow culture, cows, land, villages, cultivation of knowledge. These things are inseparable. And therefore, that is why when Prabhupada speaks about Varnashram, he's not simply wanting to label individuals, as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, but he's pointing out that actually this is an eternal system that he equates, as we mentioned, to Sanatana Dharma, that we can't actually do away with, but that we have to spiritualize. We have to put Krishna in the center, and therefore our acharyas have used the term Daiva Varnashrama. Then the whole system, problem is actually for such a long time, actually since the time of Lord Buddha. So we go back 2,500 years. Lord Buddha, he rejected the Vedas actually because of the abuse at that time on the part of the Brahmanas. And therefore, it means that actually the whole Varnashrama ideology or the whole Varnashrama system has been in deep trouble for centuries, not just decades, for centuries. And to this day, it is still not properly corrected. As a matter of fact, people here in India and other parts of the world as well, they want nothing to do with Varnashram. They don't want to even hear about the word Varnashram. Many of our own devotees are also of that mentality. But we have to see things as our acharyas are seeing things. We have to try and understand what is being conveyed by our acharyas, what is being conveyed in our Vedic literatures as well, and we have to make tangible moves. We have to take upon us different activities whereby this whole ideology can become not simply theoretical, but actually practical. Of course, that's a major challenge, of course, in itself. In any event, this was the gist of this presentation, making a parallel and at the same time a major difference naturally between Gandhi and Srila Prabhupada, because Gandhi, although he was born in a Hindu family, but he speculated. He himself admits that one of his books, actually, my experiments with the absolute truth. And therefore, we all know how Prabhupada also tried by writing a letter to him just shortly before he was assassinated to leave politics and completely be absorbed in preaching the message of the Bhagavad Gita. Anyways, many different things can be said. I've tried to convey different aspects that support from our acharyas this whole dimension of varnashrama dharma, and specifically that translates that into the need and the importance to to revive village life, where we more easily can appreciate and actually come in contact with these three gifts of nature, being that of cows, the land, and cultivation of higher consciousness or cultivation of knowledge. So I will request, here we have Tirthanath Vasudev Prabhu. Your hand is raised. Welcome again, Prabhu, and you have the floor. Haribo.
Arisha Dandal Pranam to all the customers and congrats.
Yes.
Actually, my small sharing is here regarding Gandhi, a small discussion on the morning walk. Prabhupada, I just heard that video. In that, Prabhupada mentions about, a devotee mentions about Gandhi's deeds. And Prabhupada simply says, no, take Gandhi, one of the, like he used some harsh word like foolish, something like that. And for that, he gives an explanation that he was trying to bring non-violence into politics. That's why he was killed by violence. That is a beautiful note he gives about Gandhi there. I just want to share that.
I see. Okay. Yes, yes. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, I only heard this conversation quite recently. Actually, someone had shared it, and I thought it was pertinent for our discussion today. So that's why I transcribed it actually to incorporate it in the presentation this evening. Any additional comments or questions, possibly from any of our devotees here?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes, Devashi
Yes.
Prabhu.
Yes, so you mentioned that now it is the time to work on the four movement, means village, congregation, like that.
Yes.
And I know, Maharaj, that you have been very much involved when you arrive in India with congregation from Mayapur, visiting many villages. So what is your personal experience in the village of Bengal yourself, in relation to the four movement?
In relation to the four movements, my my experience in the villages of Bengal, well, I can share this much. Actually, from I came to India when still a very large percentage of the population, much more than today, were still in the villages. Probably, I came in '76 to India and started, the Namhata program was actually started in 1979, in September of 1979 here in Mayapur, and up until 1986. So it's like, about 7 years. I very extensively traveled in villages. It was a wonderful experience. And since those days, of course, the percentage of people in villages, as we know, has gone down below 70%. When I was in India, it probably was more like above 80%, I believe. Yeah. What I want to share is that when I was, even though I was in the movement for, well, I joined in '74, so for 5 years or so, and I'd read about Varnashrama, but during all of those years, when I was going in the villages here in Bengal and Orissa, I could not really understand about Varnashrama. Yeah, the whole concept of varnashrama came, I mean, for me, at a much later stage, because as we know, it was like that when I was going in the villages, maybe less. People were beginning to use machines for cultivating their land, and using fertilizers as well, chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticides. And when we begin to understand about the principles of varnashrama, then we understand how it's important to not lose a more simple and natural way of doing farming, isn't it? The importance of cows and how cows should not be exploited, how the land should not be exploited, etc., like that. So in the late 70s and in the 80s, my relatively brief experience or exposed, I was exposed, yeah, to the villages, mostly of Bengal. Life was still relatively simple, but you know, since many decades, even before I came to India, India was losing many important leaders that were meant to be in the villages. India, over the decades, has what we use the term brain drain. You know, some of the most intelligent persons, so many people have left India, many of whom were from villages, and therefore this has really had a very negative impact, I would say, on villages. In Bengal, because people knew about Mahaprabhu, there was a very good response in terms of people joining the movement, being connected with our Mayapur temple here in Nadia. And so there was a general, I would say, general favorable response, although at that time, when I came to India, actually, that's when the communist movement, the political movement was started, and it remained very strong practically for 30 years, actually. So that was a factor, of course, negatively influencing the preaching. But I mean, to conclude on this point, because I had very less understanding of varnashrama, so I was mostly focused on the spiritual aspect in the villages, getting people to chant, you know, the holy name, getting people to visit Mayapur, to get some training. We made many devotees. In those days, you know, there was competition. There was a global competition for how many sikas one would make every month. And in Mayapur, we were making 30 sikas a month, means 30 new devotees, you know, because Mayapur, naturally, being here in the holy Dham, it is Mahaprabhu's place. So the more we would go in the villages, the more people would come, and so a lot of good results were there. But the aspect of varnashrama, I would say, again, I would dare say, possibly, which I may not be, I may not be very popular for saying this, but I would dare say that to this day, in the Namhata preaching, this dimension of varnashrama is missing. And it's important to, I mean, it's missing. Why it's missing? Because it's missing within our ISKCON society in general. We just don't have that understanding of why it's important to encourage people in the villages to stay in the villages, to encourage them to protect their cows nicely, properly, to not use chemical fertilizers, etc., etc. So that whole dimension was absent, and that's why there's a need for the I would say these two areas in terms of the Namhata is part, of course, of what is called congregational preaching, isn't it? Congregational preaching is one of our global ministries in ISKCON. So this congregational preaching, if we look in the context of the four movements, it's the third movement, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yes. I mean, Prabhupada coined it as spiritual initiation movement. So this spiritual initiation movement is congregational preaching. I was pointing out how the different ministries are corresponding to these four movements. But because we have not sufficiently highlighted, we have not sufficiently to this day understood about Varnashrama within our society. Therefore, we are lacking very much, and this is, I would say, most unfortunate, because we ourselves as devotees are losing out, and we are also not able to really deliver what we are meant to deliver to the common people and to the world, this dimension or this aspect of Prabhupada's mission, you know. And we see, for example, maybe, I believe since at least 50 years, there's a movement that celebrated actually its 50th anniversary a few years back. Some of you may know, I came across this movement. It's an ecological movement called GEN, G-E-N, Global Eco Network. Global Eco Network, it's an international group that have been for the last 50 plus years promoting eco-villages. I mean, Vedic culture is promoting self-sufficient eco-villages, but with Krishna, of course, in the center. So I'm just making the point that here we have people who are not devotees as we understand them, who may not at all be devotees or devotionally inclined also, but understand the importance of establishing self-sufficient communities. In other words, we have people who are outside of our movement, who are not devotees, who are not practitioners, who have a more clear understanding about some of these principles than many of our own devotees. And I mean, it's sad to say, but that's the reality, unfortunately, isn't it? So there is a definite need for obviously more thought, more discussion, more communication, so that we can gain more understanding. I see there are two hands up here, so I hope that's okay, Devarshi Prabhu.
Yes, thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
okay. And let's see here. Well, I'm not sure, I wasn't really looking, but I'll call upon Raghunath Puri Prabhu, and then we'll come to our Karanda Dakshai Vishnu Prabhu. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, my humble obeisance at the lotus feet.
Hare Bol. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Maharaj, thank you so much. As you said about the gifts, 3 gifts which we have got: Mother Earth,
Yes.
Mother Cow, and knowledge. Maharaj,
Yes.
I would, because since Maharaj, as you said that you started this Namhata and all these way back in 1979. Probably I was quite young. I mean, not even 7, 8 years. So Maharaj, I would just like to know one thing: knowledge degradation, which you must have seen in down the line till now. How it all happened? Like, because still I remember when the time. I mean, when I was young, my mother used to narrate so many pastimes of Ramayana or Mahabharata, even
Yes.
even about Krishna also, like
Yes.
from the Sur Sagar and all that. So,
Yes.
Maharaj, how these all things started to disappear? I would just, I mean, like your, I mean, some some light you can throw upon us so that we can also understand how it is.
Yes. Well, because of modern focus being on, material well-being, we are living, as Prabhupada explained, in the age of machines. We are utilizing more and more machines. We are becoming, or we have become, and we are becoming also more and more materialistic, more and more atheistic, and therefore we are leaving our culture and our roots, and therefore somebody was just making the observation in one of the groups that I'm connected with, how nowadays many, if not the majority, of young people here in India are very, very less knowledgeable about the characters from the Mahabharata and Ramayana, which was not the case, some decades ago. As you rightly mentioned, in those days, it was very common that people would hear these different stories and narrations, etc. So it is due basically to this modern propaganda, which is falsely leading people in general towards more and more materialistic way of life, becoming more and more conditioned, and therefore, within the educational system, these things are not there. There is an attempt here in India, fortunately, to reintroduce, to bring back, and to revive, let's say, the culture of India, the traditions that are there. And we likewise, Prabhupada, when explaining about temples, we were pointing out how he saw them as cultural places where this knowledge can be revived and people can be re-educated in actually what is most important in life. So your question being what precipitated or what caused this type of diminishing or lack of knowledge, it is simply because we are we have disconnected, we are disconnecting ourselves more and more from the real knowledge that is there in the Shastra, becoming more materialistic. And therefore, there's a need for us as devotees, for us as a society to preach this message of Krishna consciousness, not only to preach it, but also to practically demonstrate or live that philosophy. And I would say that in many ways, it was one of the questions I was asking different leaders just a couple of years ago, in the context of the COVID, for example. What lessons to learn from this 2 years that we all experienced, which turned our lives practically upside down. And this devotee was mentioning, actually, COVID has brought many good opportunities for us to preach this knowledge, because the more problems people experience, the more suffering people are having, then they will tend to be more receptive to learning how to actually minimize or solve this suffering condition, isn't it? So there's a very urgent need for us. Prabhupada was in that mood and that mentality from the very beginning, even before going to the Western countries. He writes, as we have read in the first canto in the introduction, isn't it? In the introduction of the first canto of the Bhagavatam, that the whole world is in a chaotic condition, and people are not really knowing how to solve the problem, and that is where Prabhupada proposed that this knowledge of Bhagavatam, this knowledge of the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, should be introduced in all the educational institutions of the world, so that people can come to know that there is proper knowledge. There can be clear understanding of what life is all about. There can be clear understanding of how we can actually be happy. And the best way that we can preach is to physically, practically demonstrate and live that philosophy, which means basically having as many of our devotees as possible live in such communities, live in villages where we can, these three gifts of nature that we were discussing, that Grandfather Bhishmadev refers to, then we can actually not only read about it, but we can actually experience it ourselves. But naturally, we need to prepare ourselves. We need to get proper training. And again, I mean, it comes back to basic instructions given by Srila Prabhupada. We need Varnashram colleges. I mean, that's one of the main purposes, to train our own devotees who have not had that opportunity to be exposed, especially those outside of India, to the Vedic culture. And because the situation has become degraded also here in India, Varnashram colleges are also of great importance here. So these are my few thoughts on it. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yes. Okay, we'll go to Karandat Shai Vishnu Prabhu. Yes.
Please accept my humble obeisances, Maharaj. That was so beautiful, so wonderful. My question is, how can I make the transition from living in the city for the last 64 years into the village? And I would like to do that. I would seriously like to do that.
Yes. Well, I think there are many devotees, I would say many families, who over the years have been hearing about this dimension, this aspect of Prabhupada's mission, and who would also like, as you are expressing here as well, who would like to relocate. And of course, that that needs to be done properly, in the sense that we cannot create a community alone. So it means we need to interact with like-minded devotees. For example, I was hearing a lecture from one devotee who is originally from Gujarat. He was the vice president some years back of the ISKCON Ahmedabad temple. I'm speaking about Vishnu Nam. Vishnu Nam Prabhu has been in Vrindavan. He relocated to Vrindavan a few years back. He is one of the four. Here in India, we have, in addition to the Varnashrama ministry, we have another national ministry that is called the Cow and Agriculture Ministry. And I believe it's the only national cow and agriculture ministry that I know of. So we have these two national ministries in India, which is a big plus, I would say. Anyways, this devotee was giving a lecture just quite recently, and one devotee was asking similar question, and he was telling that, I believe quite recently, he, along with some other devotees, have started a community about 15 kilometers outside of Vrindavan, where he's inviting devotees to come and to be part of that community. We have similar communities in the making here in India. And it's really the responsibility, especially of householders, to come together to discuss and to prepare themselves how to actually make this kind of transition. It is very, very important to make this kind of transition. Somebody was asking, I think yesterday, I don't know if it was in another context or maybe part of our seminars. The question was, well, yeah, it was in Vrindavan as part of this lecture that this devotee Vishnunam was giving. At the end of the lecture, one devotee asked, what is it, what is better, to be preaching in our cities? Because Prabhupada obviously wanted that we preach the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the cities, or should we just abandon that and go in the villages and live a nice, peaceful life, in fresh air without too much of anxiety, etc., like that. So that question was being asked, and actually the answer is that it's not one or the other. Both need to be there. We need to simultaneously have devotees in our cities who are preaching, but we also need devotees who are also preaching in a different way in villages, because to actually to become an example of someone living in a village where one is growing one's own food, looking after cows, and living this simple lifestyle, that is also preaching. So,
Yes.
yeah, so coming back to your question, I would encourage yourself or any devotee in a similar situation to open discussion as much as possible with like-minded devotees, as I mentioned a little earlier, and to see how you need at least, I would say, 5 families I'd written a small proposal some few years back, mentioning that if you have 5 or even better, 10 families, then after maybe a certain period of discussion where they come to know each other, where they start to develop certain skills that will be useful in the community, then they decided at a certain point, okay, 2 of our 10 families will, part of that, of course, will be to acquire some land somewhere. 2 of our families will relocate on this land. Either one can start from scratch or one can relocate in some existing village. And then these 2 families that actually leave, because most families are working in the cities. If they're living in the cities, they have to be working at some kind of job because the cost of living in cities is quite high. Our modern cities, that's the way they're set up. But if one leaves their job, this is part of the plan, they become supported for the first or for the first 2 years so that they can start developing that community. The other 8 families, they continue to work in the city. They start to visit that community where the 2 families are there. And slowly, gradually, as things evolve, then maybe a 3rd family relocates in the village. And like this is one way of planning where that transition. But definitely this type of what we call paradigm shift. We are in an urgent need of a paradigm shift within our ISKCON society. That for so long, those instructions given by Srila Prabhupada have not been properly addressed. And, I really wonder sometimes how Krishna is so merciful and allowing us, is giving us all of this extra time to actually act on those most important instructions given to us by Srila Prabhupada. But at some point, we won't have that, I would say, possibility of making that kind of change so easily. Of course, even now it's not so easy, but situation may come where it may not even be feasible or possible to make such a change. So communicating, discussing, and planning with other devotees, I would say, is one way, a very important way, to help an individual make that kind of change.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Haribol. Okay, I believe we have Janalada Prabhu. Your hand is up. Yes, Prabhu.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and
Okay.
clear.
Yes, I want a simple question. First of all, you're very well informed, and I'm learning a lot listening to you. I'm wondering, I've gone to your website, and I would like to get the Gita Nagari essay, parts 1 and 2, and also the letter. And I've gone to your website, and I've hit the link, but I get a blank page. How can I get 1 and 2 in the letter?
Okay, if you can kindly put your, we'll send it to you directly, and I'll make a note of the website blank so that we can put it up there as well for others who may be visiting. One thing I should mention, possibly you were not there at the beginning, but this essay of Gita Nagari is actually on the folio.
Yes, you did mention that, I remember, but I looked on the folio, and you also said it was hard to find. I couldn't find it.
Okay, possibly tomorrow I will try to give some pointer as to how one can find it on the folio. And I will correct that link so that it is there as well on our website. And if you want to, on the chat, if you want to leave an email address, we can send it to you by email, the whole Gita Nagari essay.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, Haribol, Hare Krishna. Okay, Shruta Kirti, Prabhu.
Swami.
Yes, you have the floor, or you have the mic.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, no pranam.
Yes.
Maharaj, regarding these 3 gifts.
India, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Some kind
Hare
of
Krishna Maharaj.
one small second, maybe our co-host can kind of correct, there's some interference there.
Yes, Maharaj. I'm just.
Yeah, okay. Yes, Prabhu, Shruta Kirti Prabhu, go ahead.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Maharaj, regarding these 3 gifts, Mother Earth is one of the gifts.
Your voice
has become the costliest and the profitable commodity.
Your voice is breaking.
So,
Yeah, I think we lost him. Prabhu, your line is kind of not clear. Maybe you can try again, and possibly meantime, let's see. Yeah, we have Gora Nitai, whose hand is up. Gora Nitai, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj and all devotees, thank you very much for your association. It's really great, I believe, to have this association. So you mentioned you focused on this day on the 3 gifts: the cow, the land, and the knowledge. And because I am coming from this farm community, this Krishna Valley, I have some experience to living there.
Yes.
So we have land, we have cows, and we have regular class, different way to cultivate knowledge. I would like to mention a 4th gift, which is the ultimate gift of Krishna consciousness, which is mentioned by Srila Prabhupada to Sasvarup Maharaj. At that time, I don't know, he was Maharaj, that that gift is to become mad for Krishna.
Yes.
And he mentioned on that level, in that letter, that I give you everything and know the temples are independently working, but you are proposing some financial concentration or something. And I say, no, Prabhupada told. I have to read it. So I have given you everything, but I don't see that even the basic principles of advance in spiritual life are always there. And sometimes there is tendency to neglect what is the real purpose of life, namely to become mad after Krishna. And instead we become carried away by big talk. So I am still thinking how things will go on. Why I'm mentioning it, that because when I was living in the farm, I hardly see the cowherd boys to attend to the spiritual programs on chanting, and they have no time. We have 40 cows, we have 40 oxes, and we hardly can really engage them fully. We have difficulty to give them food. And the other departments, they are producing grain. They have time, and then they don't feel that madness. So I would like to ask you, what is the plan to put together this beautiful gift of becoming mad and the three very important to take care of the cows? Because I have also difficulties. I could only 4 hours to work, and then I have difficulties to program. So please help me.
Okay. I would say that, of course, it's a very good point that you're making, because all of these different activities that we may take up in such a setting, such an ideal village setting, ultimately should bring us to the point of completely being absorbed in thinking about Krishna and serving Krishna. Now, Prabhupada makes the point in one purport in the Bhagavatam, when speaking about the residents of Vrindavan. Prabhupada mentions that these residents of Vrindavan, they were working very hard. They were working very hard from morning till evening. The ladies, their morning program was to actually churn the butter, to churn to make different preparations actually for their children, and they were engaged in so many activities as well. It's a question of we cannot artificially become mad, and also we have to be careful in that we simply become mad and then forget to perform our different duties and responsibilities, isn't it? I would say like this, my little understanding, if I can humbly present that or share that with you, the more we are dutiful and absorbed in the activities that are required, that are there when we live this recommended lifestyle, connected with the cows, connected with the land, and simultaneously cultivating Krishna consciousness by hearing from other devotees, the more we've become focused on these activities, that in itself should become a kind of madness, isn't it? We should be focused, and from what I understood in what you briefly read out a few minutes ago, Srila Prabhupada was making the point that unless we become very serious about performing our activities, which means ultimately become mad after Krishna, then we will tend to neglect, and we will not be ideal devotees. So my understanding in what Srila Prabhupada conveyed, Prabhupada was always praising and glorifying the service attitude of individuals. And we've heard many, many times also how Prabhupada wanted us to be engaged 24 hours a day, isn't it? Which is, of course, not at all easy, but that actually is the goal. So these are just a few small reflections, maybe from my side, but a good point. Good point. Thank you, Prabhu. We have reached our 9:30 mark, and other questions could possibly be put up in our future sessions. Thank you all very much for being present, and I look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow evening again. Thank you very much. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.